Just when you thought you were going to be singing Frank Sinatra's New York, New York on the subway on the way to the Bronx for the Pinstripe Bowl, or rolling the dice on the Las Vegas Strip, or maybe even singing the blues in Nashville, the Nittany Lions will be traveling to the Sunshine State of Florida to play against the Arkansas Razorbacks in the Outback Bowl. So pack up your sunscreen and shades because it's going to be a good one. Hello everybody and welcome to our Outback Bowl preview on Penn State Sports Night. I'm Zach Gershman, joined alongside Mac Young and Jude Wozniak. Guys, as I mentioned, there were a lot of speculations as to where the Nittany Lions were going to play at and who they were going to play. But I think one of the biggest surprises, and we were talking about it a little bit off camera, is who they're playing, being an SEC opponent, which the Nittany Lions have not had the chance to go 2-0 against an SEC opponent in history. Oh, that's one thing. And two, being on New Year's Day on January 1st at Raymond James Stadium. Mac, I'll start with you. Tell me a little bit about this.
Yeah, Zach, it's really interesting because you talked about a little New York, some of the competing bowl games. Obviously, Maryland ended up there. And I was thinking maybe Music City or Las Vegas. That was Purdue and Wisconsin. So it's interesting because those teams at Purdue and Wisconsin, they were 8-4. They were better than Penn State. Honestly, I think Outback Bowl in sunny Tampa, Florida, it's going to be a lot of fun. Raymond James Stadium. I think that's almost a better bowl game. So maybe we're thankful for that one. But Arkansas had a great finish to the season. They went 4-1 on their last 5 games after having a 3-game losing streak midseason. That one loss was to number 1 Alabama, who by far the best team in the country right now. They're on a roll. They just beat Georgia. While Penn State, they went 2-5 to end the season. Obviously, a lot of crushing losses along the way. Iowa, Michigan, a lot of tough losses and close games. So really interesting to get this bowl game. It's gonna be a really tough opponent, but it should be a lot of fun. I think Penn State should be thankful to get in this kind of bowl game and hopefully end the season on a bright spot. Like you said, 2 wins against SEC team has never happened in their history. So should be really interesting in sunny Tampa, Florida. I'm really excited about it.
Yeah, and for me, Zach, I'm ecstatic for this bowl because we avoid that abysmal Pinstripe Bowl in the Bronx. It's going to be freezing up there during that time. And for Penn State, if you look at it, this is the best possibility that they could have had. It's not that far of a flight. Everyone's starting to get healthy, and Clifford's last game here, potentially, we don't know yet, but this team has to be fired up. And I think this is a great opponent for them to play. I'm so happy they're not playing Arizona State or any of a lower-ranked team because this will really be able to show why Penn State his season is not as disappointing as it looks. If you beat a powerhouse SEC team like Arkansas, then that's a huge win. You go 2-0 this year, you beat Bo Nix earlier in the year in Auburn Tigers, and then you beat the Arkansas Razorbacks and KJ Jefferson. And I want to talk about him for a little bit. He's been phenomenal all year, only turning the ball over 5 times and only 3 of them being picks. He's really the dual threat quarterback that you want in college football. He is able to run, pass, anything, and he leads the team in rushing, or is second on the team in rushing with 550 yards. So I'm really excited to see how this defense will step up without their defensive coordinator and now their co-defensive coordinator who just got signed away this week. So for Penn State, it'll be a lot of adversity this week, and I'm excited to see what happens.
Yeah, the Arkansas Razorbacks are definitely no joke of an opponent, as you mentioned, kind of their strong end of the season push that they had. And on top of that, you mentioned KJ Jefferson, but this team has 7 all-conference players on top of Sam Pittman, who was AFCA Region 2 Coach of the Year. So James Franklin and his staff, which is now taking a little bit of a hit with Brent Pry and Anthony Pondexter leaving the team, they're going to have their work cut out for them. But for both of you, what are the keys to victory for this team? Jude, I'll begin with you, so that they return to Happy Valley on January 1st with a victory.
For me, honestly, it's win up on the defensive front and overall defensive battle because this year Penn State has a +6 turnover margin, Arkansas has a +5. So Arkansas has turned the ball over a little bit less than Penn State. They have 9 compared to Penn State's 13, but Penn State's got a little bit more turnovers this year. We have a phenomenal secondary, Brisker, and you got everyone back there. The linebacking core is incredible, forcing fumbles, being able to hit hard. But you just have to win up front on the defensive end and don't have those mental mistakes. Don't let KJ Jefferson get out of the pocket. Let him beat you with his arm. Don't let them beat you with his legs. And then for the offensive side, I've completely given up on this running game. You just got to let Clifford throw the ball, and he can't have the mental mistakes. Like I said, you need to win this turnover battle to win this game. And for Clifford, potentially his last game, as we've been saying, he needs to step up, and Dotson needs to show why he's the best receiver in college football.
Yeah, Jude, for me, it's something that Penn State hasn't been able to do all season. You talk about that run game. I think to win this game, they need to get creative in the run game. I think the run game obviously has been abysmal. Keegan Lee's the leading rusher. He only has 495 rushing yards. Penn State as a team, 3.1 yards per carry. It's been bad. Everybody can see that the run game has been terrible. But Penn State, when you watch your games, they run the same kind of shotgun draw play, zone run. They don't really change it up. I think James Franklin and this team, you need to get creative, run jet sweeps, run counter runs, run under center. Change it up so this Arkansas defense is confused and sees something that they haven't seen on tape all season long. And I think that could be a big key to victory because we've seen Kevon Lee have little sparks. He got close to 100 yards one game before getting hurt. So he's had the opportunities, but I think if they change it up, they could really have a bright spot and end the season on something that they really struggled for that was a bad thing all year, and maybe by changing it for the better.
And we also have to keep in mind opt-outs from some of these players. We've seen a history of guys who are draft day eligible that are probably going to be projected first round, second round picks, and the Nittany Lions have a handful of them on their squad. So we're going to have to see what happens with that team, with who's going to be opting out, if anybody at all does. But at the end of the day, let's say the Nittany Lions come home with a win. Let's say they return to Happy Valley. They end their season beating an SEC opponent beating two SEC opponents for the first time in program history. Mac, how would you summarize, in the case of a win especially, how would you summarize this 2021 season?
Look, for me, win or lose, I think it's still a disappointing season. I don't want to say, I know Jude's going to disagree with me because I know what he has to say, but it's still a disappointing season. 75 before the year started, maybe you tell me that, I'd say good for Penn State. That's a solid year. It's a little bit of a rebuild year, a little bit of a retool year, a lot going on after the COVID 2020 year, which was a mess. But the way they lost those games, the way they lost to Iowa, the way they lost to Michigan on that 4th and 1 Hail Mary throw, it just leaves a sour taste in your mouth. Now, this is a great jumping off point, beating an SEC opponent 2 times in a season, a great bright spot, a great little upheaval for the recruits, for the fans to be excited about next year. But for me, the season's still a disappointment. It's still the season, the grip was right there, so close to being elite, but just so far, especially in a season where Ohio State had a freshman quarterback and Michigan took advantage of that by going to the college football playoff. So for me, still disappointing season, but this could be a step in the right direction for Penn State.
And for me, I'm a part of the minority here, and I think this season isn't that disappointing because if you look at it, this is the rebuilding year, as I was saying. So 4 out of these 5 losses that Penn State had were by 2 or 3 points. And if you look at the Ohio State game, it was by 9 points, but for anybody who watched that game, it was a lot closer than it looked. You have a Clifford fumble, which is so unlucky for them, and someone who's 330 pounds outruns everybody on the Penn State offense, which who knows how that happens, but you have 3 stops when they're on the 1-yard line in the Ohio State game, and the defense really showed what they can do. For me, the biggest disappointment for Penn State season is the tight end room. And I get it, you lost Pat Fryermuth, who is an incredible blocker and an incredible, reliable receiver, but Brenton Strange, all year, he's been seen as this receiving guy, and that Theo Johnson can block but can also receive, and he's a fast tight end. But Strange, in that Ohio State game and the Illinois game, had more drops than I could count on both of my hands. It was horrible. And I get Taquan Roberson, he came in and it's a different guy, different person throwing the ball, but he dropped so many passes in those 2 games where I looked at it and I was like, I don't know, there has to be something up in that dude's head. So, but for Penn State, a win is kind of like a cherry on the top for me at this Outback Bowl. And honestly, I could see it happening because the way that Franklin gets this team ready is he's able to prepare his players and fire them up. It's whether or not he can adjust during halftime or stop maybe a quarterback run game during it or stop maybe one of their top receivers for Arkansas. So for me, the season's not too bad. It's 7-5. I know it's not the standard here. Neither is 8-4 seasons, but not horrible if you look at the roster at the beginning of the season.
You know, it's going to be very interesting to see if the Nittany Lions ultimately do come home with the win on New Year's Day against the Arkansas Razorbacks at the Outback Bowl. So that'll do it here for our bowl preview on Penn State Sports Night. For Jude Wozniak and Mac Young, I'm Zach Gershman. We'll see you in 2022.
Thank you for watching this edition of Penn State Sports Night. If you're a fan of our content, please be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel for more clips. Also, follow us on Twitter at PSSN TV and on Instagram at PSU Sports Night to keep up with all the action. For all my colleagues, we are